Scrappy has reached his limit. He seems to be at his breaking point after all of the heartache, betrayals, and unending drama he has experienced. Disturbing rumors that Scrappy may have hit his lowest point yet have left fans in utter disbelief. According to people close to the rapper, he has been going downhill ever since Bambi left him, and, in a tragic turn of events, he has reportedly tried to take his own life. The business has been rocked by rumors of a heartbreaking appeal for aid. Fans are left wondering, how did it come to this? While friends and family are frantically trying to get in touch with him. Is this indeed Scrappy's last moment? Above all, will Bambi intervene before it's too late? You'll be stunned by what we are about to reveal, so pay close attention. Resilience had always been a hallmark of Scrappy. No matter how difficult things were, he always managed to persevere. However, this time, there was a change. The ache was intolerable this time. He had finally been overcome by the weight of his loneliness, treachery, and despair. And now, the rapper may have done the unimaginable, according to people close to him. The beginning of it all was when his life's love, Bambi, left. This time, the split felt final, even though their relationship had been a flurry of love, arguments, and makeup. Scrappy, too. He wasn't doing well with it. His typical vivacious energy had diminished, his social media activity had become abnormally quiet, and his once lively presence had been replaced by cryptic messages that suggested he was experiencing significant inner anguish. His friends observed a change in his behavior. "I just don't know how to move forward," Scrappy allegedly said in a late-night chat with a close pal. "Everything feels empty without her. Nothing makes sense anymore." When he shared a string of Instagram stories, each one darker than the one before, fans started to suspect something was wrong. Everyone was drawn to one message in particular, a black screen with the words, "What's the point of it all?" written in white. His fans quickly bombarded his direct messages with encouraging words, telling him to keep going. They had no idea, though, the situation was more worse than they had anticipated. Although Scrappy's closest friends and family were aware of his difficulties, nobody truly understood the extent of his suffering. He had become more and more unpredictable in his behavior during the last few weeks. He missed crucial meetings, stopped attending studio sessions, and even stopped hanging out with some of his best friends. But the biggest red flag? He began drinking excessively, something he had previously vowed never to do again. A longtime friend of his, who asked not to be named, explained how they realized something was seriously up. "Dude, I didn't recognize him when I went to see how he was doing. The way he was speaking frightened me. He kept saying, 'I don't think I can do this anymore.' And his house was a complete mess, with bottles all over the place and shades drawn tightly as if he didn't want to see daylight. I tried to talk him out of that frame of mind, but I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't feeling well. 'I'm exhausted, bro. I just want this suffering to stop.' His family became more and more concerned as the days went by. One of the first people to openly admit that anything was gravely amiss was his mother, Mama D. She asked fans to send prayers during a painful Instagram live session. "I don't know what's going on, but my kid isn't himself, and I need you all to cheer him up. I've never seen him this low, and I'm really afraid for him." The night that altered everything then arrived. According to reports, Scrappy secluded himself in his home one calm evening and refused to take calls or texts. Sensing that something was seriously amiss, his closest friends drove to his house and pounded on the door to get permission to enter. However, no answer was received. One of them finally decided to phone for assistance after what seemed like a lifetime. "I swear, I felt like my heart was going to burst. We were screaming his name and pounding on the door, but it was just quiet inside. We had no idea what else to do." When police and paramedics finally made their way inside, they saw something that shocked everyone. We had no idea what was happening behind those walls. Scrappy lay on the floor, limp and lifeless. He was surrounded by pills, and a bottle of spirits was on the table upside down. This was an obvious call for assistance. His buddies remained motionless with tears in their eyes as the medics hurried to stabilize him. "It didn't feel real," said one of them afterwards. "We called his name repeatedly in the hopes that he would open his eyes." The word spread like wildfire as they hurried him to the hospital. "We were just praying he'd make it." Concerned fans flooded social media with love and support comments, hoping, praying, that Scrappy's story wasn't over. But would he make it? That was still the big question. And would this be the final wake-up call he needed if he did? Information about what had caused this terrible night began to come to light as Scrappy was taken to emergency care. He had been spiraling for weeks, according to friends close to him, but none had recognized how far gone he was. He was drowning in his thoughts, according to one insider. He would talk about how he felt inadequate and like a failure every day. And no matter what we said, it seemed as though he couldn't hear us since he had already made up his mind. Although doctors put in a lot of effort to stabilize him, the situation was dire. It was a race against time because reports indicated that he had consumed a hazardous combination of chemicals. For his loved ones, those minutes seemed to last forever, and every second mattered. When Mama D arrived at the hospital, she was clearly upset and begged the doctors for information about her son's health. The poignant tale of today raises a significant query. Will Scrappy be able to genuinely begin a fresh chapter in his life? Will his heart be trapped in this pain forever, or can he find a way to live without Bambi? Social media is overflowing with prayers and support for him, and fans are still feeling nervous about the entire scenario. What are your thoughts? Is there still a chance that Scrappy and Bambi will get back together, or will he find the strength to move on? Please share your opinions in the comments section below. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and enable notifications so you don't miss a story if you want to keep up with all the most recent drama. According to insiders, Bambi was upset when she received the news. This was not what she had ever wanted for Scrappy, despite their troubled past. She was in complete shock, we learned from a source. She may not have been with him anymore, but that doesn't mean she stopped caring. She felt guilty, like maybe if she had handled things differently, he wouldn't have reached this point. The fans were also deeply upset. Social media was inundated with messages of worry, and hashtags such as #PrayForScrappy became popular across the country. Some famous people even used their platforms to show their support and express their sadness. Mental health is real, y'all. We gotta check in on our people. Praying for Scrappy right now, a well-known rapper wrote on Twitter. Inside the hospital, however, it was a battle for survival while the rest of the world awaited updates. The doctors made it clear that the next several hours were crucial, but they were doing everything they could. Scrappy would have a long road to recovery if he survived. However, the world would be bidding farewell to yet another cherished celebrity far too soon if he didn't. The anxiety in the waiting room was terrible when daylight broke. Each minute seemed to go on forever. Everyone, including his fans, family, and friends, was holding their breath, waiting, hoping, and praying. Was Scrappy going to awaken, or was this really it? Monitored his vitals. Mama D, his mother, was sitting by his bedside, holding his hand Scrappy as he lay in the hospital bed, his body weak and his thoughts hazy with remorse and suffering. Aside with the steady buzzing of the monitors, which knelt as though they were terrified that letting go would mean losing him forever, the room was unnaturally quiet. Her prayers had been unceasing, her heart shattered at the sight of her kid in such a delicate state. She realized that this fight was far from done, despite her reassuring whispers. Chaos had broken out in the world beyond the hospital. The word about Scrappy's attempted suicide had gone viral. Fans, celebrities, and fellow artists had taken to social media, flooding the internet with messages of concern, support, and speculation. "We love you, Scrappy. Stay strong," one post read. Another was more accusatory. Bambi needed her the most, but where was she? The blame game had begun, and fingers were pointing in every way. The storm had ensnared Bambi herself. She was harassed by reporters, and her phone was constantly buzzing with messages and calls. People were curious as to whether she had spoken to Scrappy prior to the incident and whether she was aware of the extent of his suffering. Bambi, however, said nothing, unwilling to be drawn into the commotion. She was secretly battling her own feelings. She was plagued with guilt. Had she overreached him? Had their last chat been too chilly? She knew she couldn't change the past, but the concept still troubled her. Scrappy, meanwhile, was caught in a maelstrom of recollections and slipped in and out of consciousness. He caught glimpses of his life with Bambi, including the disagreements, the laughter, and the love that was once so intense but had now faded to ashes. He watched the paramedics racing to save him, Mama D's anxious face, and Diamond's terrified look when she discovered him. Then he noticed the darkness, a gaping chasm that would have swallowed him completely. Days passed, and Scrappy gradually started to feel stronger again. However, the psychological wounds were much more severe than the physical ones. He was urged by a therapist to talk about his emotions and face the agony that had almost overwhelmed him. He initially resisted, dismissing the inquiries with funny assurances and forced laughter. "I'm fine, dude. It's just a difficult time." Mama D, however, was not duped. She understood that feigning wouldn't help her kid because she had witnessed him at his lowest point. "Baby, you gotta let it out," she advocated. "All of that pain will consume you if you continue to keep it inside." With a sigh, Scrappy's eyes were cloudy from unshed tears. "Mama, I'm not sure how I'll manage without her. I feel like I'm just going through the motions every day." Mama D gave his hand a gentle pat. "You must learn to live for yourself, even though I know it hurts, sweetie." The words hung in the air, laden with truth. Not for Bambi, not for anybody else, just for you. Scrappy was aware that she was correct, but awareness and emotion were not the same thing. Nevertheless, there was a glimmer of optimism in her words, a tiny glimmer of light in the shadows. More people visited him as the days went by. People he hadn't spoken to in years, as well as his close friends and colleagues in the industry, reached out. They all conveyed the same message: "Scrappy, you are important and we need you here." But when Bambi eventually entered the hospital, it was the biggest surprise. The room fell silent as she stepped inside, her countenance unreadable. Scrappy's heart beat in his chest as their eyes connected. This was the moment he had fantasized about, and he had 1,000 different ideas about what he would say if he ever saw her again. But he was at a loss for words now that she was here. Before she spoke, Bambi inhaled deeply. "Scrappy, this is not what I ever intended for you." When he answered, his voice sounded hoarse. His comments, "Then why does it feel like you did?" were laced with years of love, hurt, and need. After hesitating, she sat next to him. "I never intended for you to feel this way, but I believed that we were acting in your best interests. I never intended for you to," she said, breaking off her gaze as she blinked back tears. With a jumbled mixture of rage, grief, and want, Scrappy balled his fists. "So, why did you abandon me?" Bambi looked down and groaned. "If you knew I couldn't survive without you, why did you let me go?" "Scrappy, I didn't know how to stop us from hurting one another, and love shouldn't be toxic." Her remarks were like a kick to the stomach. He wanted to correct her, to quarrel with her, to tell her that they could have worked things out. But he knew in his heart that she was correct. Despite its passion, their love had been disastrous. They were silent for a long time. Unspoken words, unresolved conversations, and a past too complex to unravel in a single evening filled the air between them. At last, Bambi extended her hand and delicately touched his. "I'm not sure what will occur next. I do know one thing, though. You are loved, Scrappy, and you don't get to quit up or walk away like this. You're required." With tears clouding his vision, Scrappy swallowed hard. Bambi softly held his hand and asked, "Then why does it still hurt so damn much?" "Because healing takes time, and you have to let yourself heal." Something changed inside Scrappy as she got up to go. It might have been acceptance or closure. Or, perhaps, just possibly, it marked the start of a new chapter in his life. One in which he discovered how to live for himself, even if it meant learning to do so without her. Scrappy let out a long breath as the door shut behind her, feeling a little less burden on his chest. He was still not well. For the first time in a long time, however, he thought that perhaps he might be one day. The weight of Scrappy's feelings was like a crushing force as he sat in his darkened chamber. Friends, family, and admirers were sending him texts, and his phone was buzzing nonstop. Everyone was frightened and had questions. However, none of them comprehended. The void that had filled him since Bambi's departure was invisible to them all. Once vivacious and charismatic, Scrappy now gazed blankly at the walls, buried in his thoughts of the love he had lost. Mama D had exhausted all options. Nothing seemed to ease Scrappy's suffering, even though she had called, paid him a visit, and even made him sit down and discuss his feelings. He was torn apart by the idea of Bambi going on and living her life without him. All his life, he had been a fighter, confronting difficulties head-on, but this was different. He had no idea how to win this conflict. Fans speculated, friends reached out, and everyone was keen to find out what was going on after Scrappy posted a mysterious comment on social media. Sometimes, the pain is just too much. This sparked the rumors. Scrappy, however, said nothing. The truth of the problem didn't become apparent until close pals disclosed that Scrappy had been dealing with severe depression. Scrappy called, to Bambi, of course, in the dead of night. As he spoke, his voice faltered, his feelings unadulterated and unrefined. His pulse thumping in his chest, he said, "I don't know how to do this without you." Despite her sympathy, Bambi held her ground. "Scrappy, we can't keep doing this. You need to find your peace and I need to find mine." After the call ended, Scrappy sat with his hands shaking and his phone in his fingers. He felt adrift and irreparably damaged. At that point, he made a choice that would have a profound impact on everyone who knew him. After receiving a string of alarming texts, Scrappy's close friend and fellow rapper Diamond showed up at his house the following morning. Her spine tingled at what she discovered. Scrappy's face was pale and his body was frail. He was hardly conscious. The floor was littered with empty bottles, a somber reminder of his desperation. Diamond called 911 in a panic, her hands shaking as she pleaded for assistance. Scrappy was rushed to the hospital by paramedics who arrived in a matter of minutes. Social media went crazy as soon as the news surfaced. As Pray for Scrappy gained popularity, fans flooded timelines with encouraging and supportive remarks. His friends, the music business, and even his ex-partners came forward to show their love and concern. Scrappy lay unconscious in the hospital room, a machine beeping regularly to keep track of his vitals. With her hands clenched together and prayers said under her breath, Mama D refused to leave his side. With tears running down her cheeks, she muttered, "Lord, don't take my baby." It was awful to see her son in such a vulnerable position. Doctors toiled diligently for hours to stabilize him. Everyone was waiting for an update, an indication that Scrappy might survive, and the anxiety in the air was oppressive. Then, at last, there was motion. A tiny whisper, a slow blink, Scrappy was awakening. Although there was a noticeable sense of relief in the room, the fight was far from done. Scrappy would have a difficult and drawn-out journey to recovery. Deep emotional scars remained, and the anguish of losing Bambi continued to hang over him like a threatening fog. However, a glimmer of optimism appeared in that instant, surrounded by love and support. He might be able to find his way back. With a flurry of emotions racing through his head, Scrappy lay in his hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. A near-death event that had rocked not only him, but everyone who loved him let the weight of what had just transpired sink in. Although the agony in his chest was unrelated to the physical, his body felt weak and exhausted from the ordeal. What hurt most was his heart, broken beyond recognition. Mama D sat next to him, holding his hand firmly, her eyes worried and relieved. "Baby, you scared me to death," she said in a heartfelt whisper. "What were you thinking?" Then Scrappy sighed deeply. Mama, I wasn't thinking. I thought I was at the end of my rope." Mama D's eyes filled with tears, but she brushed them away right away. "Please don't say that again. Look around you. Your loved ones, friends, and admirers all adore you. You have so much to live for. It wasn't that easy, though. You can't let this break you." After losing Bambi, Scrappy had spent months attempting to move on and rebuild himself, but despite his best efforts, the void persisted. He couldn't seem to fill the emptiness. To his surprise, Bambi entered his hospital room as the door creaked open. Although she appeared uncertain, almost anxious, there was no denying the anguish in her eyes. "Scrappy, I've heard what transpired." They were silent for a moment. Years of love and suffering hung between them like an unsaid burden, creating a dense tension. With a sharp gulp, Scrappy's voice was hardly audible above a whisper. Bambi groaned and moved closer, asking, "Why are you here?" "Because despite everything, I still care about you. I don't want to see you like this." Scrappy's mouth dropped open in a sour laugh. "Bambi, you departed, so caring about me won't make a difference. You've moved on, and so have I. I'm not sure how to." With a softer face, Bambi put a soft palm on his and reached out. "Scrappy, I left because we were toxic for one another, not because I stopped loving you. But it doesn't mean I wanted this for you. We were hurting one another, and I couldn't continue to live that way." Closing his eyes, Scrappy absorbed everything she had spoken. He secretly knew she was correct, but he wanted to be upset and push her away. Torn separated by their own troubles, they had endured so much. Nevertheless, she remained present even now when he was at his weakest. Feeling the gravity of the situation, Mama D cleared her throat. "Help him, Bambi, if you love him." Bambi paused, then nodded. "He needs to heal, and he can't do it alone. I can be here, but I can't promise anything. As a companion." Although Scrappy didn't want it, he might have needed it. An opportunity to start over, for himself as much as for Bambi. One thing was certain, Scrappy wasn't alone, despite the uncertain journey ahead, which was paved with suffering and recovery. And that gave him hope for the first time in a long time. The poignant tale of today raises a significant query. Will Scrappy be able to genuinely begin a fresh chapter in his life? Will his heart be trapped in this pain forever, or can he find a way to live without Bambi? Social media is overflowing with prayers and support for him, and fans are still feeling nervous about the entire scenario. What are your thoughts? Is there still a chance that Scrappy and Bambi will get back together, or will he find the strength to move on? Please share your opinions in the comments section below. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and enable notifications so you don't miss a story if you want to keep up with all the most recent drama.